All right, Sierra Leone decides 2023. Now, the Minister of Finance, Dr. Dennis K. Vandi, on Friday presented the bill entitled the Appropriation Act 2023 to Parliament on the theme addressing the needs of the vulnerable in the context of multiple crises with the view of authorizing expenditure for the services of Sierra Leone. The bill seeks to authorize expenditure from the Consolidated Fund for the Services of Sierra Leone for the year 2023 and other related matters. The executive is requesting for 9.35 billion new leone, which is about 14.0% of the GDP, to run the affairs of the state for the 2023 financial year. The budget will fund the 2023 general elections. Hence, the composition and allocation of government expenditure for the 2023 financial year reflects these priority areas. On education, the government is allocating a total of 2.1 billion new leone to the education sector, accounting for 22% of the total discretionary budget to support basic and senior secondary school, higher and TVET education. This amount includes 887.7 million new leone as salaries for teachers and 347.3 million as salaries for employees of tertiary education institutions. In health, government is allocating a total of 938.7 million to the health sector, accounting for about 10% of the total expenditure, of which 759.4 million is allocated to the Ministry of Health and Sanitation. The allocation includes 618.5 million as salaries for health workers. On agriculture, government is allocating 252.5 million to the agriculture sector. Of this amount, 18.7 million is for the salaries of staff of the Ministry of Agriculture. From the recurrent budget, government is allocating 39.2 million to support agricultural productivity and livestock development and 21.8 million for agricultural research. Transfers to local councils for the sector will amount to 11.9 million leone. Fisheries and Marine Resources, government is allocating 30.7 million to the Ministry of Fisheries and Marine Resources, of which 2.8 million is salaries for staff and 17.9 million to support artisanal fishing and the promotion of fish export activities. Tourism and culture, a total amount of 22.1 million is allocated to the tourism sector, of which 10.0 million is for staff salaries and 5.4 million as support towards the National Tourist Board, 3 million to the Monument and Relics Commission, and 1.7 million to the National Railway Museum. Roads, government is allocating 79 million from the domestic capital budget to the Sierra Leone Roads Authority for spot improvement and regraveling of trunk roads, completion of township roads, construction of major culverts, and rehabilitation of critical bridges in Freetown, as well as the ongoing construction and completion of major trunk roads, including the Bandajuma Pujaun Bondapi Road, Kenema Zimi Road, Pendebu Kaila Road, Hillside Bypass Road, Lomli Toke Road, Boti Konko Road, the Tagrin Lunge Konakri D Road, and the Petema Machu Jong Road. Tonight, we are looking at the prospect of revenue generation, expenditure rationalization, and whether the 2023 budget addresses the critical needs for the nation. My name is Samuel Wise Bangura, and this is AYVN Sunday. Good evening and a very warm welcome to AYVN Sunday. Today we shall be examining whether or not the 2023 budget addresses the critical needs of Sierra Leone. I have with me, as always, a star-studded panel of people who are in touch with the news. I have Honorable Dr. Ibrahim Onkamara, representing the All People's Congress Party in Parliament. Good evening and welcome to the show.
Good evening and thank you.
Right, I have Mohammed Ibrahim Ganawa, Senior Economist at the Institute for Governance Reform. Good evening.
Good evening, Samuel.
All right, I have Cyril Django, a political economist. Cyril, good evening and welcome to AYV on Sunday.
Good evening, Samuel, and happy evening.
All right, I also have Honorable Aliyu Ibrahim Kamara representing the ruling Sierra Leone People's Party in Parliament. Honorable, good evening.
Good evening, Samuel.
All right. Well, now to you viewing this show, listening, or following us on all our different social media platforms, you're welcome to share with us your thoughts. Drop the comments on the AYV News Facebook page. We will find time to go through some of them in the show later on. And so that takes us to the conversation here tonight. I'm going to start off with Dr. Kamara for obvious reasons. What does the 2023 budget presented last Friday to you honorable members, what does it present for Sierra Leone in terms of addressing the critical needs of the nation?
Thank you very much, moderator, and I am very pleased to be here, and I will try to be as brief as possible. First of all, starting with what are the critical needs of this nation. To us is development, growth through, of course, diversifying the economy, and then controlling inflation so that the livelihoods of our people are affordable. Now, when you look at the budget, it has a lot of theory, but sometimes the theory is only as good as on paper. The implementation aspect of it is the most critical. Because however good your plan is, if you don't put the strategies that will ensure the proper implementation of your plan, then you have a problem. Currently, we all know that the economy is in a state of decline. Now, sometimes it is arguable. The budget associates all the stagnation and decline in growth of the economy to the Ukraine crisis and the COVID. And that is mentioned repeatedly within the budget without actually telling us and the people what are we doing domestically to cushion or mitigate the effect of these external shocks. Because the external shocks will always be there. But then it is up to the managers of the economy to devise strategies and programs that will ensure that the effects do not stagnate or even deteriorate us, take us further back. And so there is still, despite these shocks, we still need to have sustainable programs of intervention that could trigger some amount of development.
So just before we get into the details
Right.
of the variables that would definitely impact or affect the growth or decline of the economy, as you put it, do you see us having the base to generate 9.35 billion new leon to run the affairs of the state in 2023?
Well, as far as the budget is prescribing, although, of course, there are several risks that are involved to the mobilization of the resources. Because as it is, if we say we are going to get all that money, then we end up increasing the deficit in the budget. In other words, our public debt will keep growing because then we have to do a lot of borrowing.
Did the budget present scenarios, I mean, ways of which government is planning to generate the money that it wants to expend come 2023? Is borrowing part of the mobilization drive?
Exactly, because from the resources that they've projected to be able to mobilize,
Right.
those resources are not able to fund all the expenditures that they have also projected, which means we are going to have a deficit as usual.
So just quickly, what the budget is saying, domestic revenue for the financial year 2023 is projected at 9.35 billion, which is about 14% of the GDP. And of course, projected domestic revenue income taxes, for example, will contribute about 3.7 billion. Goods and services tax, the GST, 1.8 billion. Customs and excise revenue, 1.7 billion. You have mining revenues, which is also projected to contribute about 576.8 million. So already there's a clear fine line, I mean, put out by the government as to how it will mobilize resources, revenue. So there is no clear tag here to borrowing to finance the affairs of the state 2023.
Well, if you continue to look at the budget, and you will see that there is eventually a comparison between the total expenditure and the total revenue. Then you will see that there is going to be a deficit. And that deficit, they say they are going to finance it through borrowing. And this borrowing, they further said, is going to be done mostly through domestic financial institutions. The banks.
Like the banks.
Exactly. Which is going to further stifle the private sector from getting funds for private investment.
All right. Let me quickly hear from Mohammed Ganawa from IGR. I'm sure you've gone through the budget presented, you followed in Parliament there. First off, is this budget realistic, taking into consideration the economic turmoil the world is, and Sierra Leone is no exception? Besides, we are bearing the brunt already.
Saying the budget is realistic, yeah, it is realistic to some extent. But in the budget, when you look at the entire budget, 101 pages, the crafters of the budget, we are so smart in making sure they put all the fine details that needs to be seen there. As Honorable rightly mentioned, seeing these fine details is different from the implementation. Nobody will go through this budget statement, this budget that was delivered in Parliament, and say the budget is not good. It's good on paper. But what is my concern here, my first take, is that looking at the budget, the area of us looking at us having deficit budget over the years, it has been something happening year in, year out. The projected revenue is 9.35 and the projected expenditure is 15.1. So it means we are expecting to have a deficit. But the crafters were so smart to say this deficit is not going to be taken from any form of foreign debt, but rather we're going to get it domestically. Domestically, you taking from the banks, then it means you are competing with the private sector. This is where I'm having problem with them taking it domestically.
I mean, almost 6 billion deficits.
Yeah, it's going to be taken from the private sector. So it means there's going to be huge competition between the public sector and the private sector for the limited resources that we have in the financial institutions. So that is one thing that
government competing with the private
sector is going to be a very serious one, because they need it and the private sector also need it. And there is no way you can thrive as a private man without you having access to financing. So I think that is going to be one major challenge that I observe from the budget. But in terms of looking at areas that will serve as a motivation for them to get the required projected income, they were also smart in saying that there are risks attached.
Right.
In as much as these are the projections, but if these risks that were highlighted, if anyone happens, then it's going to tell significantly on them in order for them to be able to actualize. So there comes the problem of us also getting another challenge of meeting even the projected revenue. So let's assume if the war in Ukraine, which is being pinpointed over and over in the particular speech, if it is something that will not cease in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 months, then it means the projected revenue, which they've highlighted the fine areas of getting this revenue. We are not going to show off getting these things. So it means there is also what another problem. So if you want to look at the realistic aspect, you have assumptions that you have to make. And these assumptions will be what serve as the hallmark in order for government to say we'll meet this or not.
Let's get this clear. So if government is saying, as a nation, we will be able to raise 9.35 billion to service the needs of Sierra Leone, though we still have gaps, but we know we can always go back to our financial institutions.
Yeah.
So, but this 9.35 billion government is saying we can generate, and they've given us areas they think they can generate those resources.
Yeah.
But that is also contingent on the realities on the global stage.
Yeah.
The war between Ukraine and Russia.
Yeah.
There is also the COVID pandemic
Yeah.
attributes on the other end.
Yeah.
So if that war continues, the projection might shrink,
Yeah, definitely.
and that affects.
Yeah, the projected revenue.
So what then does that bring to the servicing of priority areas of the state?
Okay, so as a government, you need money. You've projected this is what you want. In as much as you are saying you don't want to go to foreign debt, that is to say, the reason why they don't want foreign debt is simply because the debt is now 79.6, which is becoming unsustainable in the near future. So if you go there, even to service it is difficult because you are servicing it using Forex. And there is no way government is having the capacity now to be financing this debt on the basis of what? Increasing external debt. So what is the secret here? The secret here is this: if there is no way of them getting this required projected domestic revenue, then they will be subjected to go to these financial institutions again, in and out of Sierra Leone, to get loans to carry out economic activities. Mind you, this is electioneering year. There is no way government will sit back and say, we are unable to generate these funds. And mind you, in this expenditure, one critical component is this funding of election, which is there.
Yes.
It's so crystal clear stated there that at any point in time, government is going to use such amount. And there is no way government is not going to provide that one. If it is not generated internally, they are going to find ways of getting loans to service the budget.
Cyril, what will be your precursor remark on the 2023 budget itself presented on Friday?
Well, I have looked through it, I have compared it with previous budgets, and I have realized that this one they seek to, well, provide for the vulnerable. And I see that the budget seems to be making the claim that the problem is not Sierra Leone's problem. The problem is with COVID-19. It's with Ukraine, which I don't even understand. And it's with, well, climate change, which I don't even understand. That the entire economic doldrums that we are facing is not because of poor fiscal policies and poor economic management, but external factors which are affecting the economy here in Sierra Leone. I see it's saying that to arrest this trend, it says that they are basically ensuring there is zero import duties for rice and zero GST for rice imports. I see it also says that to arrest this trend on the poor people, the iron rod basically is now, they have reduced the taxes on the iron rod from 10 to 5%. Cement also has seen a reduction in tax from 20 to 10%. What did you notice? The measures that have been highlighted to help the economic growth are basically import-led measures. In other words, they are about facilitating imports into your country, not about you producing. Let me repeat again. They said that to ameliorate the conditions in the economy, they've simply ensured that rice, zero import duties, zero GST. Why? I was thinking, would I give a blank encouragement to importing of rice when we know that for the last 3 years we have been embarking on so-called rice revolution? Why do we have a special credit facility, the ACF, itself there, which is there to promote import of what they say essential commodities. The budget, critically examined, is there to upgrade the import sector and less to do with the production of local resources. Sort of a balancing act wherein at this time of the year, the budget should be telling us that we are now reducing the imports of rice. Or in fact, we are now imposing taxes on rice imports and even GST so as to ensure local rice production have an uptick.
But the reality as it stands now, the other day I had a conversation with Honorable Ibrahim Tawa Conte, and he shared a revelation in the sense that we've brought in many foreigners, either from Ghana, either from Ivory Coast, from Pakistan, from countries around the world that produce rice, I mean, at a short span, just to be able to. But at the end of the day, what those studies revealed is that we do not have the soil, the climate for those seedlings to thrive, germinate, and give us the required production to feed the nation. So that is, for his side, that is very clear that we have to see how we can balance the two. So as we struggle to produce, we cannot kick importation. And by the way, if you're saying the budget looks at the vulnerable, us, we go to the market every day. If we do not import, if government does not facilitate the importation of rice, then what happens when we go? Are we going to meet the prices skyrocketing like we complain every day?
It's quite surprising you telling me that a report or research says we have a very poor quality soil.
Right.
Tell them it's a lie. It's a ruse. We have some of the best soil in the world. The budget, looked holistically, is promoting still, that's the fiscal side,
yes,
the political side. It is promoting imports. It is saying our basic commodities, which it said were rice, flour, sugar, are basically enjoying import-free tariffs, lack of taxes on them. But I'm sure, when I looked at the budget, I was thinking, how have they addressed the ramping up of local production, which means you having a special credit facility that is there to promote import, and always creates the finances for the importers to have access to cheap loans. What have you done to help the local producers? Mind you, we have many, many people in this country who are interested in being part of a vibrant private sector, but who are being discouraged by official policies. Why are we simply promoting this import, which, as you know, as we know, creates a major problem? Let me show you how it creates this major problem.
Before you show me that, let's put it this way.
Yeah.
For those watching and listening to us, so we go to the market every day, we want a cup of rice, we complain that, yesterday I was in the market, I bought a cup of rice at 5 leon, and today, earlier I went there and I met the cup of rice at 6 or 7 leon. And those who import the rice would tell you, inflation. Sierra Leone's inflation is, I think, at 29.1. I stand to be corrected. You also have foreign exchange. The dollar is appreciating. The leon is nowhere to be seen on the ladder. So with all of these things, is it not prudent that we continue to, because we cannot produce, encourage those who bring in the things so that we continue to survive as a nation?
Samuel, they have, unlike you, unlike any one of us in this panel, these importers have access to $100 million of special credits. That is to say, you're not going to get the regular bank credits in which you're going to pay high interest rate. You're going to get special credits. What is happening is that the pass-through is not happening. When they have these imports, these free imports, essentially, no GST, there is no pass-through to it. That was for it to reach the consumers. In other words, yes, the government is doing all of this to ensure we have import of essentials. But the effect on the man in the street is not there, because there is not an effective Ministry of Trade to understudy lower credits to importers and the impact on the final prices. So, rice, even though they're enjoying zero taxes, cement, zero taxes, but yet still the prices are going up constantly every day, such that the economy, and I'm sure my brother Ghana will agree with me, is in stagflation, such that inflation is going up rapidly, while unemployment is also shooting up. In the West, how do they control inflation? They simply increase the interest rates.
Are they controlling it now, or they too are complaining? They're struggling to control inflation. The UK, for example.
It is
the US.
because the monetary side is working left, while the fiscal side is working right. As we go on, I will demonstrate to you that there are two strange bedfellows having a good night's sleep.
All right. Let me bring in Honorable Ibrahim Kamal. Honorable, the minister has presented the 2023 budget to you, the honorable members in Parliament. First off, how would you describe the budget presented to you?
Thank you very much, Mr. Wise Bangoa. I think when the minister presented the budget on Friday, the 11th of November, when he was reading it and after he read it, I saw hope, I saw optimism, I saw the reality that the minister put in that particular budget. You know, sometimes it's nice to be sincere and practical to the people that you are representing. You know, when you look at the budget seeks to mitigate, you see, it seeks to address the multiple problems we are now having in the world. It talks about coronavirus, the COVID-19. It talks about the war in Ukraine, you know. So as a result of that, government brought in mitigating measures. One of the mitigating measures is the issue of deferred taxes. So that the economy, the suppliers, the people that are bringing the essential goods will find a way to cushion the economic instability in the country. Government brought in credit facilities. 50 million was given towards COVID-19, 50 million towards the war in Ukraine for essential goods, especially rice, flour and fuel. You know, also there was a credit facility of $10 million for agricultural input. But notwithstanding, there was also a 76 million loans, a new loan, of money given as an e-voucher to farmers for agricultural input like fertilizers, seed rice, and the likes. For me, these are mitigating measures to ensure we cushion the suffering on the people. So for me, the budget gives complete hope, and it gives the reality of the global situation. You know, whatever way you look at it, Sierra Leone is not an economic power nation. We have the bigger economies, the United States, the China, the Europe. These are the key players in driving the global economy. If today there is a slowdown in the global economy, there is a common adage that says, when America sneezes, the rest of the world catches cold. And I think that is what is affecting us. We have put a lot of mitigating measures, but unless we have a global trackdown or approach in achieving a global economic stability, that is the time we'll start talking about economic stability in Sierra Leone.
Let me quickly ask a question. The over-reliance on importation, especially of our basic commodities, is that not affecting economic growth? Because if we do not have the fiscal activities to support what, the monetary base needs for it to appreciate over time, then we continue to give. So, for example, annually, I'm aware that we spend over 200 million to import rice. Can that not be injected into the local basis we have for the production of rice?
When you look at this budget, the Minister of Finance talked about the projected expenditure for 2023, one of the focus area will be the production of food. You know, the most important thing I believe we are reaching there, we have put a lot of structures and system in place to ensure we improve on the agricultural produce. I earlier told you about a $76 million loans, the new loans that was given to farmers for fertilizers as well as seed rice. They are now going to the farms. We have established a new agency that purely look at the improvement of seeds. And the good news we had last week from Dr. Chakanda, the one that is responsible for the seed multiplication agency, was that we are no longer importing seed rice to be planted in Sierra Leone. Now, we are now developing it, and the quality level of those seed rice is something to talk about. So that is an improvement. But, you know, there is a common saying, Rome was not built in a day. We take it step by step. The very first stage, we have attacked the issue of the importation of seed rice. And now, we have manufactured our own seed rice, and we are not going to import any longer. So what comes next? We start to grow them. After growing them, we start to harvest them. Then here comes the issue of food self-sufficiency. So it's a matter of time, and I believe the structures being put in place will make us...
Let's understand better the context of the effects of COVID and the Ukraine-Russia war to the economy of Sierra Leone. Because we know Ukraine and Russia, for example, are major suppliers of key commodities that affects prices in every country. So let's put that into context. I know, for example, Sierra Leone as a nation cannot influence anything at the global stage in terms of pricing. And the fact that Sierra Leone is still listed as a red zone country since the war, that again is affecting businesses and even freight. So freight come here, a container would be here, goes back empty, and then, when it comes to Sierra Leone, if we are to pay 3,000, you pay 6,000 because you have to take it back empty. So let's look at those contexts. How are they affecting the growth of the economy and making the climate conducive for it to thrive?
It's really affecting the economy because you talked about freight. 2-3 years ago, the cost of 20-feet container was $5,000. But now, the cost of 20-feet container is $14,000. So a businessman will consider importing his commodities to the country. When importing the commodity, the next thing he will do is to see how best he maximizes profit. So as a result, it affects the common people. So this is one major thing. Another thing has to do with Russia as a key player within the fuel or the oil sector.
Right.
And today we have a war. The fact that there is war going on between Russia and Ukraine, that cut off between the transportation of oil from Russia to Western Europe, to Asia, to Africa, as a result, also affect the economy of Sierra Leone in a practical context.
Just quickly, before I come on to the APC Member of Parliament, do you see the deficit creating a problem for the private sector to thrive? Because if government is saying, we are projecting at mobilizing about 9.35 billion, and then what we really need is at 15 billion. Then why are we going to get the remaining? So we have to resort to competing with the private sector at the local banking institutions to see what's available. So would that not shrink the space for private sector investment to thrive?
I don't think it will shrink the space for private sector development to thrive because in another areas, government is creating a leverage for this private investment to thrive, you know. For me, I think it's you draw and you push. That's a draw and push approach. We as a government, we are leveraging, we are pushing, we are open up to other areas to see how best we encourage private investment or private competition. So as a result, you realize that in as much as we are competing for the 6.1 billion deficit. But at the same time, we have other areas we are opening up to.
Okay. Let me bring you on, Dr. Kamara in. Honorable, so you've listened to the submissions from the other panelists, and so the budget clearly spells out the fine details as to how things can be addressed, how revenues will be mobilized, and at the end of the day, how are they going to be expended? Already allocations have been made to different MDAs, and we're seeing how that would translate into implementation. So at this point, what should we focus on in terms of revenue mobilization, the deficits you spoke about earlier, between the projected revenue and what is really needed to finance the affairs of the state 2023? What should we focus on?
Thank you again. And the issue we have at hand is having an economy that is declining, rising inflation, depreciating exchange rate. Now, especially the inflation, if you talk about the lives of our people, the livelihoods, this increase in prices cannot be associated with external factors alone.
Why is that?
Because domestic factors also play a huge role.
What are those factors?
Several of them. A colleague of mine did mention that the budget is promoting importation instead of domestic production. And we have our supply constraints that we needed to address in order for us to boost this production. This rice issue, if you can remember, sometime last year, there was a talk about the Tomabom and the Rombe Swamp projects. Research has shown that just one of them, if fully cultivated, can feed the nation. And the other we can use to export. So these are the areas we need to focus to boost local production. And we eat rice every day, every Sierra Leonean, ideally. Furthermore, inflation is not just an issue of importation. Monetary policy is also something that should complement fiscal policy.
So is the Bank of Sierra Leone not complementing?
Bank of Sierra Leone is not doing anything. In fact, it's making matters worse. The Bank of Sierra Leone and their monetary policy stance is making the situation worse.
How so?
How so? They have virtually doubled the amount of money supply in the economy through the new Leone and the old Leone. They were supposed to circulate in parallel for 3 months, after which the old Leone should have been withdrawn. And now what happened? Instead of extending for just maybe a month or two, we have a doubling of the period of parallel circulation. So essentially, we have too much money flowing in the economy. And this fuels inflation. You see what I mean? So there is no complementarity between fiscal policy and monetary policy.
Are the fiscal policies laying the tracks for investment to actually help the economy grow?
Of course. Fiscal policy is supposed to.
I mean, are the policies doing that now in Sierra Leone? Are the fiscal policies laying those tracks for investment, for growth of the economy?
Well, that is where we have a problem. Because macroeconomic stability is supposed to encourage investors, provide some amount of certainty in the policy environment. And then investors will have some confidence to come and invest. But if the fiscal policy is going to take away all the money from the financial sector domestically, then private investment.
You mean the borrowing?
The borrowing, of course, to finance the deficits. Then private investment will be stifled of investable funds.
Do we have at the moment funding overcrowding at the local banking institutions where, for example, private sector players would go and say, oh, they do not have access to loans, so the banks are saying, oh, we have exhausted our loan capacity?
Yeah, of course, well, that one is not even investors alone, even private people. Sometimes you go to the bank and you want some money, they will tell you they don't have enough money. We are in a liquidity stress situation in which even the banks do not have enough money to service their customers legally, whilst they are supposed to, because they have a legal obligation to always honor the demands of their customers.
Making this shift from recurrent expenditure of how we've been dealing with our budget and how we've been running the economy to one that is more capital driven, more according to the government, we have to move away from recurrent expenditure and pay attention to capital expenditure projects. How do we then look at all of these things? What we've started, let's pay attention to get them done. Let's not start new projects. And now before we allocate money, you have to give us a plan of what you're going to do and how that will be done so we see results, we see tangibles. Is this a path that would lead to deliveries? I mean, will people actually see the government delivering in these areas?
This was why when I started, I said sometimes the plans you make on paper, even the budget is essentially just a plan. It's only as good as it can be implemented. Now, the problem we have, our capital expenditure is very minimal. Most of the budget here is on recurrent, paying a lot of, wages. We're failing to harmonize the wages. We are maintaining unsustainable state enterprises, creating even more, So it's more of recurrent expenditure. When it comes to development expenditure, you cannot see a single sustainable, serious investment, public investment in serious roads, in the energy sector for that matter, for example, where we need serious. The Bumbuna, for example, it has literally disappeared from our economic strategy. And that is one sector which we needed to go from phase 1 or phase 2 or phase 3, because our energy, instead, we are now promoting importation, even of our energy. So our capital expenditure strategy is actually a very, very disappointing one, to say the least.
I would love to ask Mohammed this question. So when Honorable was talking about recurrent expenditure and wages, salaries and wages, for the longest of time, we've had this conversation about the pressure wages and salaries, it's putting on our economy. When I was actually going through the budget itself and looking at how many, so you allocate this amount of money, but almost half of it is on salaries. So how then do we try to recover and get deliverables instead of just paying salaries and all of that? But at the end of the day, these are people who've been employed to work to deliver. You do not pay them, they will cannot get a job done. How do we make that balance?
Let's be honest to ourselves in this country. For a country to continue to increase on its wage bill, it simply tells us that it is a country that the private sector is really, really underperforming. That is why you see so many people only want job from government, and government in campaigning, they say will provide jobs for people, not creating an enabling atmosphere for the private sector to thrive so that jobs will be created for people that will reduce the pressure and even give more money to government through PAYE. Rather, it is happening the other way. So naturally, the wage bill will be increasing. And you can see from their justification, 1,000 this, 500,
Right.
all of these people, they are going to employ 2,000 police officers, 1,000 and another batch of one. So all of this keeps on increasing what's
Yeah.
the wage bill. So for us to have a wage bill that will be minimal, I think government really needs to concentrate on the private sector. The private sector needs to employ people. You cannot create jobs for people through the public sector and you think that it is going to help the situation. There is no way. Rather, the bread and butter issue will always turn to be something else rather than how it's supposed to happen. So create an enabling atmosphere for the private sector, and when they are doing well, they employ people.
When we talk about the creation of a conducive business climate that government must do for private sector to thrive, what are the indicators? What are the variables we're looking at in terms of creating that environment?
All right. Firstly, the first and most important thing is the stability of policies. Like what happened with the mining companies, understand? You know, before, one thing we should know that there's continuity in government, in the governance of the country. When SLPP or APC, whosoever is there, we need to have some level of stability in our policies. So if there is no stability, mind you, the big businesses are coming from other nations. We don't have Sierra Leoneans that are having the required funds to do these big businesses as it is now, looking at the practicality of things that obtains in our economy.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. We should have some level of stability in our policy so that business people will have some level of confidence that whosoever comes to power, my business will continue to run. So this comes again to our politicians. When you are in governance, making agreements with business people, try to do it to the best of the country. They are not happening in the way that is going to benefit you because you are in governance. And when you are off governance, people see that what you did earlier when you are in governance are bad. Now that's the first thing. And secondly,
just with regards to that, I think I stand to be corrected by the members of parliament here. I think 2 or 3 months ago, Parliament enacted the Arbitration Act of 2022, just to look at how these issues can be addressed if an investor is in Sierra Leone and he feels he's dissatisfied or, being disadvantaged, then there is a clear line of remedy or addressing those concerns instead of going through the rigors of the court. Does that in any way create some sense of confidence?
Well, some sense of confidence, but the problem here is potential investors coming in, credible ones, they don't want to have a situation where they have instances of people having issues, prior companies having issues when there are change of regimes.
Right.
So that is a very bad signal. Not talking of the arbitration is for you to remedy the situation. People don't want to go into it. Look like what happened with Sierra Leone mining.
Right.
Understand? It was really, really serious on them, and even for us Sierra Leoneans that were working there, people that were working there, they had to be laid off for some period in order for them to settle their cases. So what we are saying here, the policy aspect is top-notch. We should have stable policies, and the politicians will be so honest to their conscience. You don't have to make policies that will benefit you. You know that it is not benefiting the country. And secondly, what is really key is with regards to our tax system also. You know, when you look at our tax system in Sierra Leone, you have some businesses that are enjoying so much of tax, whilst others are not enjoying. Like what Cyril was saying, he was mentioning the component of our importers.
Yeah.
Those that are importing rice, they have 0 tax rate, which one way is good, the other way is bad. But I don't think I want to go too much into that. I just want to answer the question that you asked.
Go ahead.
So I think we should have a system where our tax laws, our tax policies, are supposed to be in a manner that will not serve as a disadvantage to any set of business. Let's try to have a holistic review of our entire tax system and try to tax businesses as they're supposed to be. Another key thing again that makes the environment to be really okay is when you give an opportunity for the private sector to get access to funds when they need the funds. As Honorable mentioned earlier, even us, the private citizens that are not into businesses, there are times you want to access money, you have challenge to get money. And some of our policies, again, when it comes to monetary policies, look like what obtains with, there was a time we have what we've had, a ceiling. You should not withdraw more than a particular amount of money. That was a very bad signal, and it was hitting into the private sector significantly because they needed money to do their day-to-day basis activities. And also, mind us, we are not operating in a cashless economy. This is an economy where each and everybody doing business wants to carry the cash to do business. So some of these things that they are putting in place are also creating some challenges for what the private sector. And also energy. If you talk to the private sector, people having the hotels, most of them are utilizing gen rather than what the national grid. They will tell you about voltage. The voltage cannot put on all of their ACs, all of their equipment, all of these things. So energy is also another thing that creates an enabling atmosphere for the private sector to do well. Rather than us having an electricity system where you have lights today, tomorrow you don't have, even the one that is coming, the voltage, all of these things are. So looking at the private sector, giving it an enabling atmosphere, government needs to create that platform. And one key thing again that I will say, which is going to be the last one for now, is the area of government making sure that they should always engage the private sector. You don't just take decisions about people that are key in your economy without you engaging them. You can remember, I think since for the past 4 or 5 years, the president had to engage the private sector once. And it was so surprising for the president to know some of the things that are happening because they have not been engaging them. So the public sector, you are not in malice, you are not in any conflict with the private sector. Rather, you should engage them in order for them to tell you what are their challenges. And their challenges, you should be able to create the enabling atmosphere for them to be able to function well, if you take them as key players in the development of your country. So I think these are the things that governments are supposed to take into consideration when looking at what a conducive business environment.
You know, Cyril, this is interesting that prescriptions are being made as to how the environment can be made conducive for private sector development. Because we're seeing the wage bill is becoming something that is uncontrollable. So how do we address that situation?
Well, Ghana has been very good in expressing one fact there, the taxing system. What we have as a private sector is much more of a cartel. Certain groups of people, certain interests are affiliated with the political class who are only meant to grow. Within that circle, nobody else should come in.
So there's no genuine private sector development there?
Yes.
The players?
What I would call the political middle class. Sierra Leone does not have a genuine middle class. The rich guys now in the private sector are in the SLPP. We are part to change hands in the next few months or the next many years. It changes back to the APC political middle class. And what do you see? It is an unstable economic approach. Now, when you have a system where your tax policies are meant to protect importers who are to bring in basic commodities, I'm saying basic commodities, you are actually destroying the local entrepreneurial class who want to access government funds, government resources to build an enabling local manufacturing base. Mind you, like you said, we have been importing rice of about $200 million for the past many years, even before these guys came to power. And it has not changed. If we were to change it, it would have meant a vibrant private sector actually now producing the rice for the country. And the government, anywhere in the world, the government is the key economic enabler of growth. Let me show you how. If we want to have this rice revolution, I am sure the budget, which we've all read, should have made plans of how we are balancing import facilitation versus government buying local rice for who? The army, many bags of rice. The police force, you know, when you begin to buy local rice as a balancing act, say, well, okay, for this year, we have reduced our expenditure on importing of rice by 60%. And 40% of that is going directly to local farmers, to which the army is now essentially eating local rice. That is a massive injection of cash in the local private sector because they have a buyer. Like I said again, governments, anywhere in the world, is the biggest contractor. It is the biggest economic enabler of growth because it buys the biggest. So if the government was to adjust its fiscal policies, it would be to reduce the amount of money they are lavishing on importing rice by engaging the local private sector to produce more rice and buying that for the army, you know, the police, and the civil service. When you buy that, it will run into hundreds of millions of leons. And guess what? It has a pass-through effect because the value chain in the rice business will all benefit. The truck guys, the store guys, the threshers, because government itself is buying from them. Watch the budget. No indication, no plan, and in fact, no intention of reducing the import bills. Now, let me show you how we are having this impact. Yes, of course, we accept, really, Samuel and my colleagues, we accept that inflation is global. How is it global? Everybody keeps their reserves in Forex. The US government has been increasing interest rates, which means reducing the flow of the dollars. When you go to the bank here in Sierra Leone, what do you see? They are greedy with you accessing dollars. They are going to give you all kinds of excuses because they are trying to shore up their reserves. Nobody is keeping their reserves in the yen or in yuan or in euro. So when you are reducing the flow of dollars there in America, you are expecting others to also reduce the access they give to the economy to access these dollars. So in Sierra Leone, what do we see? We see that banks are reluctant to provide the cash flow to ensure people have access to these dollars. And the Bank of Sierra Leone, you know, have been giving them at least, I think, they did some auctions of dollars. What do? They are simply reducing their reserves held there.
So is it not the same private sector creating the problems? The private banking institutions, say for example, so you're talking about them withholding Forex, not allowing it to flow within the market, and then you have the Bank of Sierra Leone announcing a policy that, oh, okay, wait a minute, I think we've identified the problem, and you're not entitled to withdraw more than $10,000, for example, and that didn't work. The backlash that came. Oh, what is the bank governor doing? What is the bank doing? But then these are the problems you're highlighting. And then the bank governor again, or the came out saying, you know what? I think there is lack of Forex. Let's do some auction. We've seen that done in a period of 3 months, I think about 3 times, putting it out there. So what's the problem? What are we not really getting right?
Fantastic. Now, I spoke about the variants, the 2 strange bedfellows. The bank governor is releasing what he calls liquidity to the banks to ensure that there's transactions or whatever. The fiscal side, government is simply obsessed with promoting imports. See the imbalance.
So no matter what
is dollars.
So you're saying no matter what is being pumped by the bank, the impact or the effects cannot be felt because government is using that again to give the guys who bring in.
Needs dollars from where? Private sector. But we have a circumstance where the government is simply taking dollars from the bank, helping this cartel cartel to imports when they know they do not have the dollars? What should be the change? The fiscal policy should be, as a matter of fact, ramping up local production so as to reduce demand for dollars. $200 million in rice imports, $50 million in rice, sugar, and flour.
Is 10% a small amount being injected to the agriculture sector in the 2023 budget?
Well, it's a pittance, and besides what we see, there is no effective monitoring, and there's no consequence management system. He talks about my friend there, Honorable Ibrahim, government giving farmers access to loans, $10 million. Who are these farmers? Where are they? What is the report about past tranches given to them? We have to see the indicators. Exactly who are these farmers? Where are they farming? What are they producing? So, this variance, government promoting imports, the bank governor has to find the dollar, is a major disaster. We have to have a budget that says every basic commodity, rice, flour, sugar, has to be produced here. So the special credit facility we have created for importers.
Do you have what it takes to be produced here? Do we have what it takes for those commodities to be produced locally?
There comes the fiscal side. If there is a sound, sober fiscal policy where there is clear-cut objective on how to support the private sector in Sierra Leone, we can grow. What do you see?
But you're then saying the private sector, has been hijacked.
That is exactly. A fiscal policy expands that base. It doesn't look at Samuel as part of the EPC or CPP. It says Samuel has the potential to make an impact, a quick impact in producing rice. So let's help him. But that's not the case. It is closed cartel, this brown envelope cartel, who would marginalize local production and emphasize on imports. Importing when we do not have the dollars. You do not go to Guinea to use your leones to buy. You need dollars. Let's alone China, going to the Middle East to you. You need dollars. So what do? You reduce your basic commodity imports. It's basic. Check the list. You will see basic flour, sugar, rice. Basic. You ensure you expand that private sector. You ensure you give the most capable. But what you see now is entirely misfits, politically connected cartel, determined to ensure we continue to import. And they know that government is obsessed with ensuring that commodities flow by importing. So they have the zeal to say, well, we can destroy the economy because we are the drivers of the imports.
Let me bring in Honorable. You've listened to the submissions made, and what should be done to better the structure or better the system for economic growth. And as you respond to some of these submissions, the president at some point announced that Sierra Leone needs economic diversification if we're to get things right. So he mentioned agriculture, he mentioned the marine resources, he mentioned tourism as the three critical players to help in the diversification of Sierra Leone's economy. How far have we gone with, especially with the allocation and their conspicuous nature in the 2023 budget?
If you look at the 2023 budget, you will realize that there's a lot of improvement in the area of money allocated to these areas. For instance, the agriculture. Agriculture, in the 2023 budget, 252 million leones is being allocated. This is the highest we have ever received as a country in terms of budgetary allocation into this particular industry. It tells you the seriousness this government is taking towards diversifying the economy in the area of the agricultural sector. Earlier, I told you about a $10 million credit facility that was given. This facility that was given is as a result of bring in agricultural inputs to improve on the agricultural food production in the country. And we saw the benefit this particular credit facility yielded. I told you about the seed multiplication agency. Sierra Leone was importing 150 tons of seed rice per year. But fortunately for us in 2022, we didn't. This is a massive improvement in the area of agriculture. What I'm trying to say, we have to take it step by step. I believe we are reaching there. My colleague talked about the tax policy. Yeah, he made mention of identifying just few essential commodities to give them zero tax. Because one of the reasons why government decided to do that is as a result of these commodities are our essential commodities. But notwithstanding, in the 2023 budget, if you go to paragraph 53, you will realize that there's a lot of tax policy that will be rolling out in 2023. One of which is the escalation of the duty waiver policy that was approved by Parliament in March 2022. Another one has to do with the broaden the base of the goods and services tax. So these are policies government is putting in place to ensure that we are able to cushion the economy and at the end of the day becomes a betterment for all of us.
So what's the attention given now to you've just talked about the agriculture sector, right? But there's also the marine resources that should contribute to the country's diversification process. So the extractive industry, for example, for the longest time, we've always depended on it for the growth of the economy. But now we have a president who is saying, well, I think we should take a shift from that. But what has been the impact since that pronouncement was made?
A lot of impact. You talked about the tourism. We have seen a boost. A week ago, we welcomed the Budapest rally. That also will boost the tourism sector in so many ways. Most of the vehicles that were bought in Sierra Leone will not be taken to another country again. They will put it in the form of auction, and at the end of the day, it will boost the hospitality industry. We now have more hotels. We are reaching there. There are plans, there are key targets, there are key policy actions. You know, we are not going to achieve them in just 4 years. Year in, year out, we are rolling out policies, actions that we believe will, at the end of the day, achieve the key targets that this government have set in the Midterm National Development Plan.
Let me run through some messages here on Facebook. Then we'll come to look at the reformatory way forward and ensuring that we have a better economy in 2023. Belgium Bank Senior saying, as for me, this budget is not bringing any change to us, the local people, unless the top government officials. Other countries where you can see these things on ground or reflected in the people. Abdul Rashid Dakona is saying, good evening, Samuel. Okay, thank you very much for watching, but please, Eddie Grant is asking, are these reductions visible, Mr. Django? Saidu Zito is saying 9.35 billion. I wonder what Ministry of Agriculture would get from this and how would it impact food security. Mako Kunto is saying the government's borrowing domestically to finance the deficits in the budget does not affect the private sector. There is no crowding out effect here because the private sector does not exist in the first place. The bulk of the commercial banks in the country do not perform their traditional role of financial intermediation. Because of the continued increase in the non-performing loans, the government is the biggest borrower in the financial system because the banks prefer to borrow to government with some amount of security rather than the private sector. Besides, the so-called private sector relies heavily on government contracts. When the government in 2012, under the astute leadership of the former Minister of Finance, Dr. Kaifala Amara, decided not to borrow, the banks nearly collapsed because they also rely on government papers to thrive. This non-borrowing decision by the government coincided with the period the country was classified as the fastest growing economy in the world. Lloyd Banks is saying, why there is no price control in the country? I think the position of trade and industry is very broad and difficult for the Minister of Trade, and he doesn't have the ability to control the price on local commodities in the country. Mukhtar Lamin Berete is saying, public sector borrowing from local banks will kill our economy and totally deprives private sector investment and will lead to mass unemployment. Osfren Kamara is saying, to make the economic outlook of our nation yields good returns in our revenue, the fiscal policies and monetary policies must speak to each other on a level platform of agreement. Fiscal discipline is a fundamental tool towards revenue generation by creating a good balance policy on tax and spending, whilst the central bank, being a lender of last resort, must introduce a fair interest rate and secure the base value of our forex to avoid stagflation. Stimulating a faltering economy, there needs to be a good and healthy relationship between the head of the central bank and the fiscal policy committee. As an onlooker, it seems our bank governor and the government financial institution do not speak the same language for economic growth. I'm going to take at most 5 more messages. We have so many messages this evening. Mosfred again is saying, also there is need for debts and wages and salary transparency. Faya Musa is saying, policy are made, but the Trade and Transportation Ministry are not implementing it. Lloyd Banks, to my knowledge, I think the president should look into the quality education background of the Minister of Trade and the bank governor, because the way the country is running on foreign exchange and price control in the country, I'm afraid for the ordinary unemployed man to cope, because if the staple food in the country is expensive, I wonder how the people are going to feed themselves come 2023. Michael Fubi is saying, Honorable, have you got your own farm? It's time every one of us starts taking agriculture seriously. The huge money is given to most of the statesmen must be cut low, which could be of immense help to invest on agriculture and promote local productions that would unlock our economic potentials. It's high time we stop hoping for the moon to shine. Instead, let's use our own locally made lamp to make things easy for our citizens. And so many messages, guys. I would have to apologize because I would never be able to go through all of them. The final message I will take is from Lansanas. He's saying, please, Samuel, can you ask the government representative if indeed the government has fulfilled its promise as per its manifesto, especially with the government failure on fiscal policy? Interesting. So many messages. Guys, you would have to forgive me. I can't go through all of them. I would have to stop the messages there. But, Honorable, let me ask this question. With what we're seeing right now, what is happening across the globe and in Sierra Leone, if you are to engage the government right now as to how should we get things right, what are the alternatives?
Well, essentially, first of all, we need to properly understand what is happening globally and domestically.
We've not gotten the understanding yet?
Well, that's why our policies are not talking to each other.
So the thing now is, you've been able to see these things happening, and so now you should speak to the nation, tell the government what needs to be done. How can we get things right? How do we fix it? What are the alternatives?
Well, we can do that. Unfortunately, here we can just be brief, because those are a lot of things that needs to be done. But just to be brief for the purposes of this discussion, the Sierra Leone economy needs to be understood in terms of what is it that we can produce. Where are we competitive enough to be able to attract investment? How can we diversify the economy? Now, skillfully, they have tried to identify certain sectors for diversification, as you mentioned earlier. the agric, the fisheries, tourism, trade. They left mining out. I would include mining.
Mining has always been the
because these
the
are,
man.
thank you, these are the areas where we have competitive advantage. And so we need to develop them. But then how do we develop these sectors?
Right.
That is where we need to.
And that's the question perhaps I would want to put to you now. How do we develop those areas?
How do we? Well, that's the $1 million question, actually. Because you will have to take each of these sectors and look at what are the constraints, the binding constraints that needs to be addressed. But for one thing that I will give you for free is that in all these sectors, be it agric, tourism, fisheries, trade, we need energy. Energy to growth. We need energy to propel industries in each of these sectors. But we don't seem to have any long-term sustainable energy projects that we can be proud of.
Is the Bumbuna not one?
The Bumbuna was just started. The Bumbuna, if it is completed, we can even export energy instead of importing. The previous government started a phase 2. And then we are now supposed to move on to a phase 3 because the full capacity of Bumbuna would supply both the whole of Sierra Leone and even beyond. That is where we are not going, and we are not making attempts, and we need to make attempts. Besides, we have several perennial rivers in this country, which are potentials, that can generate, hydropower. But we don't seem to be moving in that direction. And these are the sustainable areas if we really want to grow sustainably. Yes.
Mohamed, let's look at the reformative way forward. Now, with what we're faced with what we're challenged with, how then do we move past that? What should be done? Both, fiscal-wise and monetary-wise, how do we address the recurring challenges in our economy?
Samuel, if you take your time to go through this budget statement, there is an area where they stated the topic is containing inflation and exchange rate policy. They try to present some of the things that we are looking at here.
Yeah.
But before going to that, I want to be so honest to my conscience. As government, what they are facing now, it's not like they are promoting tour importation. The thing here is, based on the situation, what this Ukraine, this COVID just did is for these two key killers to expose nations that are not having strong fundamentals. So now that they have exposed nations that are not having strong fundamentals, what is happening now? Nobody is thinking of going to the drawing board now to fix some of the fundamentals people are presenting here, like what you are saying, agriculture, all of these things. So what is happening? In order for us not to have shortages, we are closer to election. People are going to vote.
Yeah.
You don't want to have a situation where I want to buy rice. It is better for me to buy the rice, even if it is 500, because it is available, than a situation where it is not available, like what is happening in Liberia. The government don't want that. So what is the strategy? They are putting a mechanism in place to make sure it is available, even though it is expensive, but it is available. So all of the policies that they are putting is just like a situation
for the availability of the basic
availability of this basic commodity. That is why they don't mind losing so much on tax revenue. They have to see zero, all of these things. These are just mechanisms put in place to manage the situation as it is. But now there's challenges. We have 10 and we have 10 recommendations the way to go. The first one, let's look at a situation where most of what is happening here is importation. I think government, the budget statement made it crystal clear now that under the exchange rate, and that is to say, looking at the fiscal and the monetary, they say the fiscal components will complement the monetary component. So what does that tell us? It tells us that at the end of the day, the entire system, it's like they are telling us that there was a problem before. Now they are telling us now that the fiscal is going to make sure it serves as what a complementary effect to that of what the monetary. So which is very good from them. But now, what obtains with our exchange rate? Because most of the inflation we are seeing, Honorable was saying, is because of the too much money supply. That is one economics concept, but to be honest with you, what is obtaining here is not about the money supply. People don't even have money. Understand? Mm-hmm. Even we saying doubling the money supply. Trust me, people don't have money. People don't have money. Yeah. Look at the business people, they will complain to you every day that what they used to sell, they are not selling now. Mm-hmm. So if the money is so much in our hands, with the inflation rates, I think we should be able to increase our uptake a little bit, but people are complaining all over. So I think the major problem is with our exchange rate. So there comes...
The complementarity you're talking about between the fiscal and the monetary policies. Yeah. How can the fiscal complement the monetary in the sense that we do not produce, we do not export? So where do we generate?
Okay, this is where now, if the central bank is making the funds available, that is to say they are auctioning this forex, the dollar, in order for the dollar to be available. So the fiscal component now is for us to have a situation where they should have mandates. The mandates are this. One is you should not give loans to people that are not undertaking developmental projects or people that are not embarking into agriculture. There was a time where they say in order for you to get certain amounts of loan, that amount is supposed to be directed to agriculture, for example. Mm-hmm. So if they say their loans are available, but the loans that are available are going to be given to people in the agricultural sector for them to increase output, but not just giving them the loan without the monitoring and evaluation, which is something that is dying in Sierra Leone. There are times I even say there is no monitoring and evaluation taking place in these institutions. If it is happening, look at the amount of money Honorable is mentioning here that these are funds that have been given to farmers. What are we seeing in the form of output? Even toothpick we still import. The onions we still import. And these people are being given funds on a daily basis. We are calling 10 million, 17 million, all in millions, huge amounts of money. What is the impact we are seeing? So what we are saying here with regards the fiscal complementing the monetary is for them to ensure that let's start giving funds to businesses that are involving into import substitution strategies rather than us taking money, giving it to people that are just importing. So if, for example, we want to encourage people to produce, we make sure those interests that we say zero on importation of essential commodities, let's start giving our people in this country, whether foreigners or Sierra Leoneans that are having good intentions, doing some background check, and proper monitoring and evaluation. Let's say we want you to be producing rice. There is a market for rice here. That is where most of our forex is going, besides the petroleum product. Right. We have a market. You rightly mentioned, we have thousands of police officers, military personnel. We have the, how to call it?
Fire force?
The fire force and the prisons. This is a very big market for government. So that can serve, so this is the area I'm talking of us having a complementary thing here. If they want the equipment, the funds are available. They can get this equipment and get these things up and running. That's the area for what? The Forex. And also we have businesses that are exporting. Those businesses that are exporting, we're supposed to increase the level of what? Uptake to their exportation. So now, two-track approach. One is import substitution. Those that are producing things that we are importing in Sierra Leone. That is to say, we try to get value addition. As against those individuals that are exporting, but the level at which they are exporting is relatively low. Let's try to improve on their output. And that's the area for the import and that for the export. Even the mining. Now we observe that there was a ban, but now they've made it crystal clear now that they are lifting the ban. Yeah. The license processes is so slow for people in the fishing sector. They are complaining every day. These are all ways of us getting forex, which will reduce the pressure on what's the forex. And also another area for the forex again is this currency swap. This is something I've been preaching since 2018 to date. I keep on saying that most of what we are importing, we have nations that are accounting for most of these things. For example, prior to the COVID, China used to take up to 80% of our importation. What was imported at that particular time was from China. And we have a bilateral relationship. We don't need the dollar to buy from China. Why can't us have a situation where the yuan, which is being utilized in China, our central bank have a bilateral relationship with the Central Bank of China to make sure we buy from China without us fighting for dollar? That is something they said they will be working on since 2018 in one program at SLBC by very self and the deputy bank governor. On to date, nobody. Understand?
Yeah.
So these are all things that they are saying. So this is just for Forex. We have several things that we need to do, and also government need to be realistic to the people of this country
In what sense?
by making sure that when we say we are putting money into agriculture, so much money is going into it.
Right.
We say 10%. The Maputo Declaration is saying we should be thinking of 15%, at least 15%. We are far. But even with the 10%, what can we account for? What is it there to show the people of this country that XYZ for the past 20 years we have been putting so much money into agriculture? What are we seeing? Like the free quality education, at least we are seeing some things.
Right.
Whether it is good or bad, but we are seeing something. But agriculture, what are we seeing? There is no evidence. So I think we need to go to the drawing board. And we are relying so much on the Ukraine war to give excuses. We know it is impacting, as economists, we know it is impacting the world. There is no part in the world now where things are easy. But Ghana, which was considered as a middle income country, they are struggling, understand? You mentioned about the interest rate. The interest rate at this point in time is not solving problem for our situations here. Our T-bills is now 27.3%. Ghana is 31%, but things are still going worse. So it means we need to take more radical monetary and fiscal policy approaches rather than the traditional ones talking of us increasing interest rates. What is attractive about our financial market? There is nothing attractive here. It is difficult for any businessman or any investor in the US to take his funds to Sierra Leone financial.
Do we have a viable stock exchange in Sierra Leone?
It is something that I don't even want to. We keep on teaching our students, but there is nothing that you can say, this is the example, this is what obtains. You go to other nations, you see these things. So the traditional monetary approach and fiscal approaches, understand, are the things that are creating situations to be worse off. That is why when they come, governor and others, when they come to talk to the people, you just see traditional monetary policy statements. And those things are not changing the narratives in no way. So I think we need to go to the drawing board. The last time here, Samuel, I told you that as a country, we need to declare economic emergency where we come with all the fine players to the table and find a way of changing the narratives. But as it is now, things are not getting any way better because we are not being realistic with what is happening in the country. Rather than us just putting fine things on paper, when people look at those things, they say, wow, Sierra Leone is moving to another level where we know what is happening.
All right. Cyril, how do we take a path that leads to reforms? I mean, for better economic growth?
Samuel, you've been asking us this question since time immemorial. Nobody is listening to us. Nobody cares about it. Because if anybody was listening, Ganawa has stated 100% my conviction based on the examples we've seen in other countries. Balancing act between imports and exports. Rice. Government is the biggest buyer of rice. Balance in the sense that we're going to be buying 40% of the rice for the prisons, the police, the army, and what have you, using local resources and local production. It's not in the budget there. When we have that systematic approach, that fiscal approach, that we're going to increase our purchase of local rice, it puts less pressure on the bank governor, who has to be providing the forex, because the bank governor has a very limited monetary space, which is to increase interest rates or decrease interest rates. Government has to begin to buy local rice for the army, the prisons, the police, the civil service, which, like I said, will enable the supply chain within Sierra Leone to invest more. But when they do that, let me tell you what happens. The cartel will come forward and reemphasize the need for us to continue to support them to be importing food into this country. And then we'll have governments in the past and now who would continue to engage them to be importing instead of reducing this import. When you are importing much, much more, you are putting stress on our reserves. Let me show you the very budget. Spoke about a reduction in our reserves from $700 million to $500 million. Why? It says that we have been busy using these reserves to facilitate imports, not to help local production. So crucially, if a government is serious, we would have gotten a sober fiscal approach that is there to ensure we provide the basic commodities. We stop spending $100 million to import basic commodities and instead invest that on the local middle class, empowering them, and like Ganawa said, monitoring them. Since 19 Jubilee, we've been spending on agricultural production. What are we seeing? The Chinese came last week with machinery. Before that, we have had lots of other donations. They just simply give out these things. And who? So party affiliates, so friends and family. And then when they destroy them, no case, no issue. No, I think we must have a government approach that says this is business. When we give you these things, we are going to effectively monitor you and evaluate you. And if need be, we're going to ensure we punish you through the ACC. I also think if we're going to have a very strong economy, the opposition has to be much more serious. Much, much more serious. I was listening to Doc explaining his own beats, what they would do or what can be done. I would have thought, in all realistic terms, there should have been a shadow minister of finance who should be delivering his own mini budget or his own budget by Monday tomorrow to counter, to show alternatives
from the side of the opposition.
Well, I don't even know which side of the position Mr. Doc is representing. But there has to be a shadow opposition portfolio that puts into clear perspective what they would do. But I bet you, we have not gotten that. And if power were to change hands next year, it will be the same excuses. And I do not see how we are going to change it when we do not have a strong opposition ready and willing to, at every turn, have a shadow somebody who would be presenting the alternatives to the people of Sierra Leone. Look at the budget. They say the exports was around $300 million. Look, what are these exports? They say mainly driven by the iron ore exporting. Let me say one thing. We are exporting $300 million worth of different goods, but mainly the iron ore, which, as a matter of fact, is not money for governments. It is only licenses and royalties, which the budget says have been delayed. Most other companies are not paying this pittance in two things, royalties and licenses. So when they say that the bulk of the exports are our natural resources, how much of that constitutes government revenue? Tiny amounts. We have to fundamentally examine what are these guys exporting? How much is government earning from these exports? But where we have delays in these companies paying royalties, paying licenses, and those, even if when they are paid, they are pittance to the reality, then it smacks of a slap in the face of the government and the people. Also, if we were to see a change in the economy of Sierra Leone, I think we have to see a deliberate measure by government in reducing its own recurrent expenditure. I was looking at the budget profile, and please do, guys, please check the appendix to the budget. Chief Minister, an office I would discard if I were in government, has a 21 billion leons, 21 billion leons non-salary recurrent expenditure. In other words, 21 billion leons does not include salaries. Of that cash, the office of the chief minister himself has expended in 2021 11 billion leons. That money is a good cash, you know, to ramp up the energy sector, which Doc was talking about. That if we are to attract investors, we have to have reliable energy supply. Okay. But 11 billion leons to chief minister for recurrent things like fuel and this. Why that for? Why do we have that for? Why not necessarily discard these offices, these eaters of our budgets, and actually decide to work on a genuine middle class? Right. Those who are genuinely capable of producing for this country.
Let me listen to the submission of Honorable Ibrahim Kamara. I mean, what path are we in now? I mean, where do we walk to get things right?
Thank you very much, Samuel. You know, looking at the position of government, you know, we talk about the policy priorities and strategies for 2023 that has to do with a better economic sustainability. I think as a government, one of the policy strategy we'll be looking at has to do with to promote private sector development for job creation. You know, we have been doing it and we are going to continue to do it. If you check the archive, you check the agreement that have been passed lately in Parliament, you will realize that there is a lot of agreement that has passed in that well of Parliament that has to do with trade and industry. Companies, beverage companies that are coming in, companies that are agricultural companies. In 2022 alone, we have passed more than 5 agreements of companies that are about to be established in Sierra Leone with an investment capital of more than $40 to $50 million. So for me, I consider it as a systematic process, and I believe we are reaching there. Another thing I will take from my colleague, the economist, when he talks about loans not to be given to people that does not undertake development projects. I think it's something the banks are doing, and it's something, it is something the banks are considering. You know, going back to the credit facility, most of the people that benefited from those loans, you know, some of them are local producers. You talk about the company that is owning this paddy product, the paddy mayonnaise, the paddy butter, and the paddy oil, and the likes. These are local companies. They benefited from such loan facility. So for me, I think there is a lot of improvement going on, but because of the huge challenges we had, that is why you are not seeing the improvement. But with time, I believe these changes will start to be seen. Another thing is to see how best we contain the issue of inflation and stabilize the exchange rate to lower the cost of living. Definitely, the issue of containing inflation is very, very challenging as it is now, because when we talk about the war in Russia and Ukraine, there is no way a country like Sierra Leone will talk about reducing inflation without talking about it. Because if you go back to the World Economic Outlook report that was published in October 2022, October this year, it actually tells you that the issue of inflation, the issue of exchange rate is a global one. But as a country, we are pushing. And no sooner, by 2025, as the projection is calling for, that we'll start having a stabilized economy, and the inflation rate will reduce from its present position. It is now, that is 8.8% to 6.5%. That is the time we will be getting to where we are expecting.
All right, so let's round off the conversation, gentlemen. We do not have time. So, Honorable, I'll start off with you. What's your part in short? And So, I wanted to call you honorable, but I'll still give you the title. I just hope I do not get a call from the speaker. But quickly, Cyril mentioned that, looking at how things are panning out globally, I mean, opposition parties should be telling, especially when we're driving to the 2023 elections, what can you offer? So if you're saying, oh, the economy is terrible, things are not going bad, but the opposition is not giving us any alternative. So what is that?
Thank you very much for that question. And I would like to a little bit disagree with that. If you follow the debates in Parliament, after every budget, or even when His Excellency usually presents the State of the Nation addresses, if you follow those debates in Parliament, the opposition always proffers alternatives to the policies that are failing our nation. And the same thing is going to happen with this one. When the debate commences, I would definitely invite my colleagues here to pay very keen attention to those debates. Our governance system does not provide for these shadow cabinets, but as a constructive opposition, the All People's Congress have people monitoring every sector of the economy. And we know we have the expertise and ready to provide strategies that will move this country forward.
On the economy, for example, we've not seen. I'm a journalist. I have followed. I have watched things happening, but I haven't seen any alternative provided. Even to the point, the 2018 presidential candidate was even asked to proffer solutions, and he said he was not going to let out his strategies because nothing can get 70% for win. So these are the things. So, and parties in oppositions are governments in waiting. So how do we then believe that, oh, we need to vote for party P, for party C, for party D, when they've not shown any, they've not given us alternatives to what we are experiencing. So it's, they say the devil way no better pass the angel way no know.
We have been profiling. This is why I said, if you were following the debates in Parliament, you would have learned a good number of alternatives, because we have always advised. What we can do is advise for the good of the nation, that these and these policies are not good for us, and there are these alternatives. We've been talking about this macroeconomic stability right from the beginning of the tenure of this government. And they have not listened. They continue to bloat the wage bill. They continue to cause political instability. These are all areas that causes uncertainties and discourages investors from coming in. It becomes then very difficult. If a country is not stable, foreign direct investment cannot be attracted because these investors are afraid. You cannot come and put your money and then all of a sudden there is instability, you have to run away and leave your money back. So this is why fundamentally, stability of a nation is a prima facie for attracting any investment and for growth and so on and so
Sierra
forth.
Leone is ranked 4th most peaceful country in the region.
Yes.
Does that not encourage investors?
It was, not currently.
It is currently the 4th most peaceful country in the region.
Peaceful. But what happened with our macroeconomics? This issue of us talking about Ukraine and COVID, you know, it affects all countries, but not all countries are experiencing the inflation that we are experiencing.
Around the globe?
Around even neighboring countries.
I'm told every country is.
No, that is completely false. Some other countries are able to manage the situation. Why is fuel not as expensive in Guinea, for example, as it is in Sierra Leone now? Why has the exchange rate not depreciated in Guinea as it has depreciated in Sierra Leone, for example? And these are our neighbors. where we do a lot of trading with them. You see, so it all boils down to domestic policies to manage the economy, to stabilize the system that will encourage local production and attract investment, especially foreign direct
So we're not getting our local policies right.
We are definitely not getting our local policies right.
Okay. And thank you very much, Honorable. Mohammed, what's your part in short? You've listened to Honorable. I mean, these are there are indicators that we must pay attention to.
Yeah, as Honorable was presenting his part in short, there was something that was so interesting, saying that they have been profiling solutions, or they have been giving alternatives. I think one big problem that we're having, even with the government and opposition, is the communication. They don't talk to the people of this country. They don't talk to people. Like what is happening now, the economic situation, I was expecting the president to address this country. We really need to have a situation where we talk to people in order for people to understand. And let's be honest, our government, they have done so much during the course of this crisis. But people don't even know. This paper, 101 pages, how many people will go through this paper? How many people? Yeah. This budget, how many people will go to it, Samuel? To be honest with you, very few. Right. The reason why in CL, even all over the world, people don't have time to read large documents, huge documents, because at the end of the day, they have other things to do. There are so many things that they have done, but nobody's communicating. Opposition, if you are profiling alternatives, these are things that people should be knowing. Because if people are not knowing, it's like you don't have any solution. So why should we vote Mr. X out to come with Mr. B when Mr. B is not telling us that they can change the situation around? So I think that's something that we need to look at. But on a more serious note, when it comes to the economy, I think government should be honest to the people of this country. Let's come to the drawing board and fix Sierra Leone. This is the only country we have. We don't have another country. We cannot continue playing with the minds of Sierra Leoneans. We need to move from this and look at a better way. And above all, one key thing, Samuel, as government, it was stated in the budget that they are now going to be looking at our exports as against the import. What we are spending, what is going out, and the volume of goods that we are receiving. We want to know whether it is matching. Because I overheard from certain quarters that what we are spending, we are depleting our reserve from 900 to 500 now. It is going down every day. So we want to know if actually what we are spending in terms of importation, it is the volume of goods that we are getting back home. That is one thing that government really need to pay attention to. Because there are times I was discussing with a very close friend of mine who is saying that what is happening with all the fine policies, but is it that there is something happening which is not formal? Yeah. So I think we really need to work on that one. As a government, it is stated here that now they're going to, seeing it there now, it tells me that people are not doing their work.
Right.
People are not doing their work. Because if we are spending so much, and you and I, we are totally aware that what is coming in is more or less the same volume that has been coming in. Even with the inflation, it's little. So why is it that we are spending so much on this importation, and what is coming home, we really need to know, because after every 3 months, we should check the GL to know whether what we are spending is a volume that we are coming in. If not, then it means we need to check it. And as a country, let's continue to pray for Sierra Leone. Governor mentioned it. Let's continue to pray so that our politicians will think for the betterment of this country, not just for themselves. Like Cyril mentioned, as we have a middle class. I've learned something today that we have a middle class. Each government, you have the guys that are considered to be the big boys. After that, other guys come again to the stage. So I think that's my...
Cyril, what's your closing courtesy?
Well, I want to suggest to government that we must begin to buy this fuel as a block. Guinea, Sierra Leone, Liberia, and whatever, should begin to converge the resources. Because let me tell you, Ukraine, it's a ruse, it's a lie. Russia, there is an attempt to ostracize it from the world markets. So what are they doing? They are selling their fuel at a much more reduced price to who? Blocks. To the Indian economy, to the Middle East economy. We have to go beyond this Sierra Leone as a power. Sierra Leone is not a serious economy anyway. So we must begin to work with Guinea, Liberia, Ivory Coast to buy what? Fuel from where? Russia, which is giving them at much, much more reduced prices. Different from what's happening now, where Sierra Leone has to go on its own to fetch its own fuel. We have to begin to engage Liberia, Ghana, Nigeria to begin to buy bulk from where? From Russia. When you control this fuel supply, when you have effective control of supply of fuel through cheap means, you are going to stabilize inflation. Because every inflation so far that we see is triggered by energy mismatch. So Sierra Leone cannot on its own reduce the price of fuel. But it can work with Ghana, Nigeria, Liberia, Guinea to buy bulk from Russia. Secondly, I must commend the president, really, on one side, President Bio. I was looking at the appendix to the budget. The non-salary recurrent expenditure, he spent, or his office spent, 117 billion, yes, old loans, 2021 for running his office. 2022, it has gone down to 96 billion leons. 2023, they are thinking of going down to 70 billion leons. Let's see it replicated across all ministries, and that will be a good sign for economic growth.
Just quickly, do you see hope, Seal, do you see hope that will be able to generate the projected revenue?
Well, based on the inflationary trend, because once it's 9.35
billion.
35, well, I like the old leons, please forgive me, I like the old leons. Trillion. But what if the inflationary rate continues to grow? It means nothing.
Okay. All right, Honorable.
Yeah, I want to take it from where my brother Cyril have just said, what if the inflationary rate continues to go? Mm-hmm. If you look at the projection for inflationary rate, presently in 2022, there is 8.8% projection of inflationary rate. But the first quarter of 2023, because as a result of economic activities being introduced by government, there will be a reduction from 8.8% to 6.5% of inflation rate. I think that is a progress. You see, Honorable Dr. Ibrahim Bun Kamara was talking about wages and the wages being bloated, you know. The reason why the wages or salaries have been bloated, I believe we know. Of course, the government campaigned on one of its major national development plan, which is human capital development. And human capital development talks about the very first one, education. And we are now seeing the improvement in the free quality education. And as a result, you need teachers, you need people to come on board to see how best we improve on this free quality education. I think one of the major reasons for the increase in the wage bill is as a result of the recruitment of teachers. In January 2023, there will be a recruitment of 1,000 police officers. Then in March, a second set of another 1,000. We made an increment of salaries for teachers that will take effect in January, the first set. Of course, there was an increment in the security sector. So you expect the wages to grow, to increase. But what is the reason for the increment of the wages? It is as a result of the improvement or the strides being made by government to see how best it achieves its human capital development plan and its national development plan. For me, I think the way forward has already been stated in the budget with government policy priorities and strategies for 2020. I think that is what, as a government, we are going to continue with, the one that has to do with the strengthening of public finances and also maintain sustainable debt level. We will improve on it. And also the improvement of governance and accountability, which is also a policy for government come 2023. I think we are going to improve on it. With that, I believe Like I said, Rome was not built in a day. Systematically, we are going to achieve our economic sustainable goal.
All right. This is where we end tonight's program. Many thanks to all of you, my panelists, for honoring the invitation. It's been a pleasure being with all of you here this evening. Many thanks to those of you who followed us on our different social media platforms, those of you who watched us on television, listened to us on radio, and those of you who participated by sharing with us your thoughts. And we continue to apologize for not reading all of them. But in case you miss a part of this show, a repeat of it comes up on Thursday, 10 p.m. Here on AYV Television. But be sure to catch a fresh edition next week, same time. Same station, because we are your home of all things credible, factual, and all times balanced news. My name is Samuel Wise Bangura. The show has been AYV on Sunday, and up next is our AYV Primetime News. Until then, take care of yourself and have a lovely night.